that's Peter on the right, me on the left, and I had just gotten married too. That's my wife, Neela. She had just gotten back from the Peace Corps in Morocco when I met her. And I got married 2 months before we left for Mexico. We had, Peter and I had just left the Nelson office, and we had a couple of jobs, and we had just enough money to buy one-way tickets. So we went to Mexico with one-way tickets to participate in the competition. Now, of course, this was before, before computers, so everything that we did was either by freehand or with instruments such as the compass. I still keep my compasses, because it was with one of these compasses that I developed the idea of integrating the 6 and the 8 with the 5 rings. Now, for the Olympic program, we had 3 basic things that were mandated. We had to use the rings, we had to use 3 languages, Spanish, French, and English. And I remember Ramirez Vasquez, the chairman of the Olympic Committee, who I can tell you, if you're interested in this and we have questions and answers, I'd be glad to give you the whole history of how I got involved with going to Mexico. But Ramirez Vasquez was the chairman of the, he was the architect of the Mexican Pavilion in New York at the World's Fair, and then he was made chairman later of the Olympic Committee. So he told us that he didn't want a guy leaning against a cactus with his sombrero down and with a bottle of tequila. So, in other words, they didn't want to have the typical image of Mexico. He wanted something refreshing, and he wanted it to be Mexico. So that was it. Now it was from the geometry, of course, of the 5 rings that I was able to develop the basic elements of the overall logotype. And the overall logotype takes the geometry of the 6 and the 8 and combines them into the word Mexico. This was interesting because I didn't like it at first, because I realized that, the 6 and the 8 is very, it's a synthesis of 2, or a compact formation of 2 letters. And I had to do that with all the letters. They didn't work when they were individually placed next to the 68. But that was really the magic that tied the whole thing together and gave us a very strong image that was not just typography, but it related very much to Mexico. And it related because the first week that Peter and I went down, we spent a lot of time at the Museum of Anthropology, and I discovered something that I think is, these people that did the art in the pre-Hispanic culture in Mexico were just terrific. And they're very similar to what we call, graphic design today, because they were able to work with geometry and develop natural forms, human forms, pure geometry, and they did it in such they were such experts at this that they created a beautiful legacy of historical forms. This is a stamp, and you can see here that they work both flat and in the 3rd dimension. And what we did also worked well in the 3rd dimension. This is the entrance to the Olympic Stadium. By radiating out of the Mexico 68 logotype, we developed the look of the games, and that was the parallel line type of motif. Now I have to also say that they had the Op Art show in New York City just before going to Mexico. So I was very excited by that. I learned a lot of how to get a lot of energy out of a flat image, movement, expansion, and so forth at the show itself in New York. So by letting this happen in a very natural geometric way, really the poster of the games was established. We used it in many, many ways. You can see the painting on the wall murals around Mexico City, uniforms for all the guides. Now the uniforms, I designed those with Julia Murdoch, Peter Murdoch's wife, and both he and Julia were graduates of the Royal College. So she designed the uniforms. I just helped her get the graphics placed on them. And you didn't have to have the word to know that it was part of the Olympics. Now we explored many, many different ways of going into space with the graphics. This, of course, is a large helium-filled balloon, and we flew these above the different installations, and it was very effective because you could go down a roadway and see the balloons and know where an Olympic event was taking place. I worked very closely with Eduardo on the Mexican Pavilion for the Triennale in Italy that year, and we used the Olympics as the theme. And this was the first model we made, and the idea was simple. It was taking the logotype as a floor plan and just mirror imaging it on the surface, and then connecting with all the walls and structures that were between. So if you look down into the entrance of the exhibit, that's what you saw. So it was a complete environment. It was a very, very exciting environment.